Today on Think Smart with TMFG, Mike and I are going to be reviewing a Fidelity Report on retirement. Mike, this will be our final podcast in the basement of our office here in Thornhill. We set this office up, and we've been here now a little over 20 years. Previously, this space was an embalming room when the office was a funeral home. So luckily for us, we've been able to use the space. We've put some walls up, made it look nice.
Converted to a studio, and it works.
It works. We're looking forward to the new studio that we're going to have in our new office. I also want to apologize. I made a statement in a previous podcast that my daughter, who was in Australia at the time, picked up on. She said, "Dad, you know, the TTC, you've been able to tap your credit card for at least 10 years now to get in and out of the TTC." So I apologize for that. I was raving about how you could do it in Singapore, and it hadn't yet reached the Canadian marketplace. Turns out I don't use the TTC much.
I was on it last week. I tapped.
Okay, well, there you go. So let's get back to the survey. So the survey asked about 2,000 people, average age of 62, about half men, half women, and they asked them how they felt about retirement. What are their things that are going well? What are they struggling with? And overall, let me talk about the initial finding. Canadians remain optimistic about retirement given rising interest rates, inflation, and market volatility over the past number of years. Since 2018, that optimism has dropped a bit, though. 73% are still optimistic about their plans, but it used to be 80%. So the change, the inflation, rising interest rates, markets have all had an impact. If we explore a little deeper, by province, the most optimistic province is in Quebec.
Yep.
They're almost 80%, still 80% optimistic. Least optimistic is in the Maritimes at 67%. And British Columbia and Ontario are in that 71, 72%.
I'm actually surprised the numbers are that high.
I was very surprised.
Yeah, I thought, when you hear the news and the reports on people concerned about retirement, it seems like we're in grave shape. But those numbers seem a lot better than you would have thought.
So one of the most important things about being optimistic turns out to be having a financial plan. So if we're looking at the pre-retirees of that group, 85% of that group were optimistic because they had a financial plan. If you were pre-retired without a financial plan, that optimism drops to 55%.
Did they serve people coming out of our office, or I'm surprised that many actually had a financial plan in place. And it's good news anyway.
Well, it's not that 85 had a plan.
Yeah.
It's that those who did have a plan, 85% of them were optimistic.
Yeah.
Those without a plan, it was only 55%. What were some of their biggest concerns? For pre-retirees, they were optimistic, they were unsure, they were nervous and anxious. Those were all the different things that they were. For retirees, they were calm, optimistic, confident, and prepared.
Remember, it takes a while to get used to retirement. We have something called a client advisory board, and about 4 or 5 years ago, we sat down with this group of clients that give us advice on how to run, a client's perspective on our business. And we started talking about retirement. And a lot of them had a fear of retirement. And it was funny. There was actually some people were trying to coach new retirees into how to be retired. Because there's a very big difference between spend your own money. When you work, you spend someone else's money. That's easy. When you spend your own money, it's a whole different mindset. And people have trouble dealing with that.
When you're working, you can see your future cash flow.
Yep.
When you're not working, you've got to create your future cash flow. So it's very different. So we're going to talk about what are some of the priorities if you're pre-retired. 61% said their biggest priority is saving for retirement. And I think it should be. It should probably even be higher.
Yep.
I think it should be 90% biggest priority should be saving for retirement. It's your last chance.
Yep.
Once you retire, unless you want to go back and take a second job, work part-time, whatever it may be, there's no future cash flow coming in that isn't coming from your investments or the government. Number 2, saving for a major purchase. 20% were saving for a major purchase. 12% said saving to help an elderly parent. So that's something relatively new. And 12% said saving to purchase a bigger home. Not something I would think is a great idea just before retirement, unless you've got tremendous resources.
The one key of retirement is not have a mortgage. I mean, that's the first thing that makes for a successful retirement.
So they then did a little deeper dive. For those born outside of Canada, their biggest priority was saving for retirement at 71%. Their second biggest priority at 35% was saving for their children. And in third place was helping an elderly parent.
Yep.
No surprise, a lot of new Canadians see that looking after their children is just as important as looking after themselves. For those born in Canada, 58% were focused on saving for retirement, so a little bit of a drop there. Only 16% were focused on helping out their kids, and 9% again supporting an elderly parent. Mike, what are some of the biggest reasons Canadians are not retiring today? What's holding them back?
Well, a large percent, 64%, said the rising cost of living has them worried. They're concerned, particularly in the last couple of years. Inflation that's coming up has really scared them off of retirement. They don't think they're going to have enough funds to meet their expenses, not right at this point, but maybe 10, 20 years down the road. Another 58% said they're concerned they haven't saved enough money yet. You know, they've done savings, they've sat down with a financial plan, but they don't have confidence in the amount they have saved at this point in time.
Isn't that interesting? It ties back into that only 60% were worried about saving, and almost the same number are worried that they're not going to have enough saved.
Yeah.
I tell those clients, they're in that last 5-year stretch, stop spending all that money. Put it away, and then you can spend it in retirement.
Yeah, we know there's always a dip, and we've talked about it in podcasts before. People save well at a young age, and they hit this relaxed stage when they hit about 50 years old, and they stop saving. And it's a deadly thing to do because they have a good position. They feel really confident because they've saved more money than all their friends, and all of a sudden they stop saving. But those are the really important years because you're making high income at that point in time.
Almost 40% of the population don't feel that they've really planned for retirement and have no idea what they should do. So 60% feel they got a plan, but 40% of Canadians, age 62 on average, don't know what they're going to do. That's a big number of the population. 38% were concerned about the performance of their investments. I don't think, if I look at clients we've been working with for 15, 20 years, I don't think performance of their investments is a big concern.
Yeah, it's probably it's the least controllable part of your whole plan. And that one's out there for the world to decide. The rest of the stuff you're in control. You control how much you spend, how much you save, things like that. The markets are going to do what they're going to do.
You mentioned debt. And sure enough, 32% are concerned about the amount of debt that they owe at age 62.
Yeah.
That's a big concern because you may not be able to work till you're 70. You may get let go at 63. And if you've got debt, that immediately means a downsize and less money to spend in retirement. A lot believe it's extremely important to help their kids financially, support their kids financially. I actually had this discussion. I was away for a day with my daughter, and I had that discussion. I said, my goal is never to kill your ambition. I could really help you out, but I don't want to take your ambition away.
Yeah.
And I need you to go through some of the hardships that yourself and your mom went through.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most valuable things that people can go through in their life is figuring out how to be successful and how to put food on the table.
Fixing your car, things like that we had to deal with. When something goes wrong where someone's not there to bail you out, you'll find ways.
I thought this was an interesting one. Those born outside of Canada are extremely concerned about the return of their investments. And I could be wrong here, but I think you and I have talked about this before. Many new Canadians struggle with investing in the markets.
We take for granted that we have a very safe marketplace. When you talk about corruption and things like that, the North American marketplace, although we've seen some corruption happen in the past, it's 1/100th of what you see on the global scale. On the global scale, there's really no general accounting practices. There is no government bodies they can go to when things go wrong. We're so lucky in North America in what we can do and how we can invest in the markets. And when people come from different places, they were exposed to a different type of market where you don't know that everything you're being told is the truth. There's no place to go if you lose your money.
So, are people retiring on time? So they asked a couple of questions on that. Only 8% of the people are expected to retire earlier than they planned. 40% are expected to retire later than they planned. And actually 55%, pretty big number, are expected to retire when they planned. So that's pretty good. I'm a little worried about the 40% that are going to have to work later, but maybe that's to do with the inflation and interest rates and the amount of debt that they had. People who are age 65 and older, of that group, 20% have delayed retirement, mostly due to the rising cost of living. So one of the things, there used to be this rule, as you get older, that should be the amount of growth in your portfolio. So if you're 70 years of age, you should have 70% bonds and 30% in fixed income.
It just doesn't cut it anymore.
Look at the last 10 years.
Yeah.
If you retired 10 years ago, you had 70% of your money in bonds. You've almost earned zero return from those bonds over 10 years.
And 30% of equity just can't carry that.
There's not enough
carry
of
on
it.
the shoulders, right? The equities always have to carry on the shoulders the weight of the bonds you put in your portfolio. And I always imagine someone trying to hike up a mountain, and the equities are hiking up this mountain, and they're the weight of the bonds on their shoulder. So if you only have 10% bonds, it's a pretty easy hike.
Yeah.
If you start throwing yourself to 40 or 50% bonds, think of that pack on the back that's going to hold you back.
You and I are evidence-based advisors, and we've had the opportunity for 30 plus years of seeing the evidence when clients don't have enough growth in their portfolio. They start running out of money. They start having to cut back, downsize, and they put themselves in a very difficult situation. Helping their kids, there's not an opportunity. They can barely help themselves.
Yeah.
Are people saving less? So this was some, I would say, disturbing numbers. 42% of people age 62 were saving less than they did a year ago. 39% invested less than they did a year ago. Forget just savings, putting money in the bank. Almost 40% of the population put less in their retirement accounts, in their TFSA, in their open account. Another little scary one. 56% of retirees agreed they're not going to invest in anything but very safe investments for a long time because everything that has happened in the markets in the last little while. Mike, has anything in the last little while been different about the markets?
No. Well, it's always different, but it's the same. It's different and the same.
It's the same story for 100 years. Markets have always been volatile.
Different players, different subject, but the same.
And that's a tough one to convince people of. Everyone thinks this time is different.
Yeah.
It is not different. It's the same as it's always been. It's the same movie, but starting and ending at different places.
The silliest question we always, will there be a correction? Well, of course there's been a correction. We know that. There's going to go down markets. There's going to be corrections. We're going to go through recessions like we always have. So
now's the time to promote ourselves.
Yep.
And here's the evidence. Pre-retirees, those that have an advisor, have peace of mind. Those without an advisor, only 34% have peace of mind. It's almost double the number if they've got an advisor. For retirees, 66%, if they have an advisor, have peace of mind. Without an advisor, it's less than 50%. For pre-retirees with an advisor, 2/3 of them felt financially prepared for retirement. Those without an advisor, only 38%. When's the best time to get an advisor? Well, today.
Now.
but if you're in your 60s, you absolutely need to get an advisor to help get you through the next 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, you hear these do-it-yourself ads for that, and they just don't address the subject. People have trouble doing this. It's not an easy subject to do, particularly you self-manage things. And you don't have anyone taking a non-biased look at your own situation. And sometimes you have to tell people things they don't want to hear. And when you go to these discount places where you don't get that. No one cares about you. Everyone's just going to go and find a way for you to flip your portfolio and make money off transactions. They don't actually care if you're going to be in retirement, if you're going to be comfortable in retirement. They don't care if you run out of money. There's really not much of a concern about that.
It's interesting. We had a few transfer outs of smaller accounts, younger children in their 30s. And their main reason for transferring out was fees because of all the press fees of made.
Yeah.
And one of the questions we asked them, well, what's your next advisor going to do different? Yeah. And their response was, well, I'm going to be the advisor.
Yeah.
And from the evidence we're seeing from this survey, that doesn't work out too well. You're going to be less confident. You're probably not going to accumulate as much. You may save in fees, but you're going to have struggle getting to and through retirement. What are the biggest priorities and what's the value that financial advisors provide? For the pre-retired, it's saving for retirement, keeping the foot on the pedal, keeping that savings rate up, whether it's 15, 20, 25%, keeping it all the way to retirement, to the floor. Number 2, minimizing taxes, managing the investments, planning for unexpected expenses.
Yeah.
After 30 years, we know unexpected expenses aren't unexpected. They happen all the time, but they're lumpy, so people don't expect them.
And most importantly, putting together a plan. People don't have a plan on their own. You need a written financial plan and something that gets reviewed on a regular basis. It's not just a static document that you did 10 years ago. It's something that should be pulled out every year, at least every year and a half to go take a look at, say, hey, where was my plan a year ago? Have I progressed the way I should have? And do I need to make any changes? Has my lifestyle changed? Do I need to make any adjustments to what I have to save?
So let's look at the numbers. For pre-retirees, the importance of a written financial plan, a big number, 84% felt financially prepared, felt emotionally prepared, felt socially prepared, and physically prepared. Those numbers drop for those without a plan to 43% financially prepared. Retired individuals, and this number is almost at 100, those with a plan, 94% felt financially prepared. For those without a plan, it drops to 74%. That's a 27% difference for those with a plan than without. A couple of other interesting things. Things do you think of? It's far more important for women to have a positive outlook for retirement without a plan than those for men. For women, it's 89% important for women. For men, it's only 61%.
Well, women are not as ego-driven as men. That's the problem, right?
I'll get by.
Yeah.
Is the man's, well, I'll get through this. I'll be okay.
We've all played golf and been beaten by women bad because our egos get in the way. And we spend our time hitting balls in the bush when you could be right on the fairway.
Here's some interesting numbers about our province of Ontario. People in Ontario are less likely to have a written financial plan. Only 24% of respondents had a written plan, whereas the rest of Canada was at 28%, about a 20% difference. Another interesting one, a third of Canadians' financial plan has not been updated since it was initially written. You and I have had a big complaint about the banks. They bring you in, they give you a big 30-page financial plan, and they never look at it ever again.
Sealed in a vault, and it's never addressed.
So here's some takeaways for you. Many Canadians are not optimistic about their retirement plan. 75% of people in Ontario do not have a written financial plan. The higher cost of living has made people delay their retirement. Those people who work with a financial advisor have higher peace of mind about their retirement. It's important to get that financial plan done before retirement. People are saving dramatically less than they were a few years ago due to higher expenses, higher interest rates, inflation. It's important, as you mentioned, Mike, to have that plan updated on a regular basis. Work with a good advisor will accomplish that. The study may seem a little self-serving for a financial advisor, but as Joe Friday on Dragnet used to say, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. These are the facts. We didn't make this study up. These are the facts. Those with an advisor, with a plan that review it regularly are going to have a more successful retirement.
You are dating yourself with Dragnet references, you realize.
Well, maybe not from our audience if they're 62. I'm 63, so that brings us to the end of another week. Thank you for joining us. This is Rob and Mike with our final podcast from 7787 Yonge Street. We are with the McClelland Financial Group of Asante Capital Management.